Thorny, as we venture into the R&R, two truths are consistent. We love our dear Montana state, and we love great beer. And you know who else feels the same? Jeremiah Johnson Brewing. Brewed in the heart of Montana in downtown Great Falls, Jeremiah Johnson takes Montana's finest ingredients to craft some of Montana's favorite beers. And now, Jeremiah Johnson's second tap room is open in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Their Citra IPA is probably one of my favorites. But we all know, Thorny, you're not the hop lover I am. You're more of a Mountain Man Scotch Ale.
Well, Foley, I'm certainly not a mountain man, but you are right. I do love their Mountain Man Scotch Ale. But come game day, you and I are both cracking their Golden Bobcat Pale Ale. So when you're looking for a quality craft beer brewed with Montana roots, a relaxing tap room, or just a six-pack to take to your favorite Bobcat tailgate, Jeremiah Johnson delivers. Make your next beer a Jeremiah Johnson, and as always, go Cats.
At Blackfoot Communications, our mission is to connect people, businesses, and communities to their networks in Montana and beyond. Through Blackfoot sponsorships, local ambassadors, and public programs, we support initiatives such as the Emergency Broadband Benefit, fiber deployments, and community events. For information on our commitment to improving our communities with fast, reliable, and secure internet access, go to blackfootcommunications.com/news.
Welcome, everybody, to the R&R Catcast, a fan-based podcast focusing on Montana State athletics. We're two dudes named Ryan from the state of Washington talking about our dear Montana State. We hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome back, Bobcat fans. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the R&R Catcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Foley. Sitting across from me, looking dapper in his big old beard again, is my good buddy, Ryan Thornburg. We are the Ryans of the R&R, the Montana State affiliate of the Big Sky Podcast Network. And we have a dang sponsor in Jeremiah Johnson Brewing, brewing awesome beers in downtown Great Falls with a second tap room over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Thorny, it's National Championship Week, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I couldn't be more excited.
Well, how about this? It's also the Big Sky Breakdown. Colter, Nuanez, SkylineSportsMT.com. Happy to have these guys on and happy to be on with them. This little co-promotional podcast. I've done this a couple times with a couple of these Big Sky Podcast Network guys, and it's a lot of fun. And this is a big deal no matter what. If you have any affiliation with the state of Montana or Montana State, MSU playing in the big game in the FCS National Championship, this is huge. This is awesome for everybody from around the Treasure State or anybody that's connected to it. And I've been listening to you guys all year long. I know you've been listening to me either on ESPN radio or on this podcast. So really happy to be with you. And this should be a lot of fun. So I got to start this out by asking both of you guys, because I've covered Montana State now. This is my 11th season. And it's given me a huge base for everything I've built in my career. I've loved covering Montana State. Sports Information Director Bill Lamberty at MSU is definitely one of the closest people I have in my life. I love that guy. We talk all the time, and he's helped me out so much. And just the moment after the game a couple Saturdays ago, I don't know if you guys were there or not, but in Bozeman, it was such a spectacular afternoon, and that accomplishment was so chilling because of all of the different things that I know we're going to get into in this podcast. But I mean, I take great pride in having objectivity and not a lot of emotional connection to this stuff. Yet standing on the field of Bobcat Stadium on December 18th, 2021 was absolutely a day I'll never forget in my life as a football fan and as a journalist and all of it. It was a surreal moment in time. And I know you guys like live and breathe this stuff, man. I mean, this is the Bobcat fan podcast. So you guys must just be over the moon. How are you guys feeling right now?
I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think anything's fully set in. Like, some days I'm like, holy heck, we're going to the national championship. And there are times like, it's just a football game we got going here. I don't know. I'm all over the place in reality. And I don't know if it's fully hit me yet that I'm getting on an airplane in 4 days and flying down to Texas to watch, like, the moment you live for as a fan. Like, not everyone ever gets to see their team in any sport ever compete for national championship or the world title, whatever, in any sport. You're lucky you get to do it. So yeah, I'm over the moon at the moment. That's for sure. Like right now, hearing you talk about that, here I am. I'm up.
Well, I'll parlay on a little bit about that. Like one of the things I was wondering is kind of what Colter was talking about is just like, man, we weren't there. We were going to go there, but the travel just became kind of a hairy situation. And then we were going to put all of our eggs into going to the national championship, whether we were, whether we won that game or not. But for me, like I remember being misty eyed on that Saturday. I had to look out the window. My wife's like, "What are you doing? Are you over there? Are you crying?" And I was like, "No, I'm not crying." So it hit me hard. And then over the past like, oh gosh, 2 weeks, the lull of just fandom because I don't know about you, Colter, but I think for Ryan and I, we were like just craving kind of some sort of content, right? I mean, and Ryan and I are kind of content producers for this. And but just mum's the word around Bobcat Nation for at least for us. We're not well connected as far as like people giving us information. But I was sitting there yesterday and it just hit me. I was like, holy cow, we're going to the national championship. So it kind of goes in waves for me. But yeah, I'm all over the place too.
Well, it's an incredible moment in time. And in my feature that I wrote after the game, I mean that was what I led with was that there was so many people that were just so euphoric and ecstatic. The students and all of the really young generation of Bobcat people. The fans that hadn't had really any relation to any of the suffering that Montana State fans had to go through for so long. And it was never because the Cats were so bad. In fact, it was because the Cats were so close for so long. And that was what was so crazy to watch and observe their program. But I wrote that in my story, like for the people of a certain age, I mean, mid-30s and above, I saw as many grown men that were either completely dumbstruck or crying as I saw, enthusiastic students and young people doing it. So I saw both of your reactions on full display on the field of Bobcat Stadium. And it was just a surreal moment, man. It was, and I was thinking that same thing. I appreciate you guys. I know Foley reached out and asked that you could use some of the screenshots from the press conference. But that was, you guys had that great Instagram post and the Twitter post that said, the passing of the guard, the changing of the guard. And I was sitting there thinking that as we were booking our tickets to Texas, I know we're going to get into our travel stories and then all that here in a little while. But when Tommy Millott and Troy Anderson were standing in the corner of the room waiting for Brent Vigen to get done with his press conference, and then they took a seat next to each other, I don't care if you're Bobby Houck for the Grizz, man. Like, it doesn't even matter if you're the biggest Grizz of all time or anybody. If you don't feel a certain sense of pride and emotion looking at that and like also see how cool that is and how much that represents like the state of Montana and its essence and why people love Montana and why Montanans have so much pride in being from here. It was unbelievable, man. It was spectacular. And so I'm glad you guys got to experience it. And I'm also so stoked for you guys. You get to go to Frisco.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, that's the pride that you have being from Montana. And, we haven't been in Montana for years now, but like it never leaves you. It's always there. So just seeing those two Montana kids just sitting next to each other, kind of like almost just giddy, like school kids right there, just warms my heart.
Oh, and like I said to Troy Anderson when I talked to him last week, and he agreed with me full force. What's Montana's best export? Like, besides our outdoor activities and our picturesque, postcard-like towns that people live in, besides that, it's football. And that's the other thing that makes this so cool is that not only is Montana State now going to represent the Treasure State, first team from Montana since 2009 to go to the national championship, but they're also doing it in such an on-brand fashion, right? You got the Shucks freshman quarterback from Butte and the stud senior from Dillon. And it's just like this perfect story. I know we're going to get into that too, but I seriously think it's one of the greatest stories in the history of Montana sports. And I think that everybody that's observed it is lucky to be along for the ride.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it because I did want to ask you about that because when you guys put up that post-game presser and I'm sitting there watching Troy Anderson and Tommy Millott, just the feelings I got just watching that post-game press conference, just watching those two, I understood it in the moment and it hit me right away. I was like, this is the passing of the guard. And you could see Troy Anderson's body language. He's sitting there fidgeting with his tape and his fingers. And then you got the young Tommy Millott, who doesn't look like he has a whisker on his face to this day.
Sure, man.
And he's sitting there straight up. He straight.
Perfect posture.
And he's just, perfect posture. He's got the stoned face, and man, what a moment. For fans, what a cool moment just to see that, to just appreciate Troy Anderson. And then, what a moment for Tommy Mellott too. And obviously after the semifinal game, it was just absolutely cool. Hey, let's talk about what's in our golden coolies. We haven't talked about that yet.
Guest go first.
Tony, what's in yours, buddy?
No, let's let the guest go first. I think that's good etiquette.
Okay, yeah. Colter, what are you drinking tonight, buddy?
I have a single shot of Espolon tequila, which I will take here momentarily. And I am also drinking I've learned this the other week. I've lived 34 and a half years now on the earth. And I didn't realize there was a difference between tall boys and tall girls in terms of canned beer. I always thought that anything that wasn't a 12-ounce beer was just a tall boy. But I was informed that a tall boy is actually a 24-ounce in the beer lexicon, and a tall girl is a 16-ounce. So I guess some people call these pounders as well. I learned all sorts of stuff.
Sure, that's not Brooks trying to pull your leg there.
That's exactly right. Maybe he's just screwing with me. Regardless, I have a 16-ounce can of PBR, so I'm not quite as sophisticated as you men with your craft beer tastes.
Hey, I think last week I had a High Life and fully had a Rainier, so
yeah,
that's money in the bank.
All right, Tony, I'll take it. I got what's called a Bubble Stash from Hop Valley, and it's Hop Valley. I can't remember where they're from, but I get them at the local. Yeah, there you go. I get them they have a stand over here at the Spokane Indians ball game, and that's where I know them from. So I picked up a 6-pack this week. It's pretty good stuff.
Very nice.
Well, I have two methods of beer that I drink on here. I either like the beer or I pick it for the name to speak to me about what I want the Bobcast to do. So that's the latter there. I got Everybody's Brewing, which is in White Salmon, Washington. Stir it up hazy IPA because the Bobcast need to stir it up. We're gonna crash this party. It's over from North Dakota State, so we're gonna stir it up. It is a hazy IPA, and you know what? It's fine. It's a hazy IPA.
You're not an IPA guy.
Don't love IPAs, so you know that I'm doing this for the Bobcats. That's I'm just a team player like that.
All right,
cool. Gotta love it.
Hey. So let's start this narrative off. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the cause and effect relationship of the Cat Grizz. And obviously it was a galvanizing win for the Grizzlies that set them off to the postseason. But looking back, I think we probably could say it was a galvanizing loss for the Cats. Just kind of wanted, I know you've talked about it on your show, and most of our listeners listen to your show, but I just kind of wanted to see how, specifically, how you think that loss affected the Cats to kind of where they're going today.
Oh, man. So many different ways. I think that game, that Montana win will be a moment in time. It will be like a road mark that we look back on for a long time for both programs, just depending on what happens from this Saturday and then forward. Because, I think that for both sides of the rivalry, because the streak was so impactful and omnipresent and so galvanizing to the rise of the Grizz and so detrimental to the roadblock that existed for the Bobcats. Because of that, there's been such a high priority put on the rivalry game when it comes to continuity and coaching staffs. And, that game, regardless of what a coach says, it's a point blank fact that it matters more than every other game. Not because I think that, not because you guys think that, but because the employment of the coaches depends upon it. And, it's like I've said on my Nuanez Now radio show, which, by the way, if people want to listen, they can stream it at 1029ESPN.com, where you got the podcast on all your podcast hosting platforms. But like I always say on my show, what does every coach since Sonny Holland retired in 1997 in Montana State history, with the exception of Jeff Choate, have in common? They all got fired. And that's a crazy thing to say when you're talking about Sonny Lubick, who has a stadium named after him in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Dave Arnold, who won a national championship, and Earl Salmonson, who won multiple national championships at North Dakota State, and Cliff Heisel, who had more close calls than not close calls against the Grizzlies, and had a winning record almost every year, but could never get in the playoffs, could never get over the top against Montana. Mike Kramer obviously fired for different reasons, but you have to think that so much of the stuff in the program was motivated by the initial first push to end the streak and beat the Grizz. Rob Ash, more wins than anybody in school history, more playoff appearances. The only guy in the last 50 years to win 3 straight Big Sky titles that didn't coach at Montana or Eastern Washington. And he gets fired because he's 2-7 against the Grizz. And so there's been this like omnipresent priority on winning the rivalry game. And it's so, I think, over accentuated. And I truly think that the fact that, there are two different conversations to be had here too, right? Like Rob Ash not beating the Grizz was only part of the demise of Rob Ash. So we could do a whole podcast series on that and just the way that complacency can influence the future of a football program.
I'd listen.
But 100%. But all I'm saying is that repetitive coaching changes, especially if it's because of the result of one singular game, which, oh, by the way, happens to be the most hyped and pressure-filled game that your team's going to play all year under the biggest spotlight that matters the most to the people that follow your teams, it's detrimental to make coaching changes with that being the number one thing that causes the coaching change. And I think that happened at Montana with Bob Stitt getting fired. And again, I'm not saying that I don't think the schools shouldn't have made moves away from both Rob Ash and Bob Stitt. I actually think that both of those were justifiable decisions. I think both the programs are much better off from it since those happened. But I do think there's an over prioritization on that game. That said, I think that Bobby Hauck and his situation at Montana with the administration that's there and the way he was hired and the booster influence that was behind the way that Coach Hauck was hired, plus his past that included so much success on the field and so many problems off the field, all those things, I think that Bobby Hauck is basically operating under an unimpeachable tenure at Montana right now. I don't think that there's a scenario in which Bobby Hauck is on the hot seat or could ever get fired, except if he lost repetitively to the Cats. That's seriously it. And I really think that Bobby Hauck not was coaching for his job in that game. I don't think that. But I do think that if they would have lost to the Cats again and it would have been a full 5 years since they'd beaten the Cats and a full 5 matchups in a row, I think that the conversation would be started for sure. And that's how crazy the rivalry is. So that said, when Brent Vigen was hired, I thought the first thought I had was that Jeff Choate has this spectacular place in the minds of Bobcat faithful, and justifiably so. He preached his vision so amazing. He helped fulfill that vision in a lot of ways. But more than anything, he has 4 legendary wins in the rivalry game. And, in reality, Choate was a 500 coach at Montana State, but he went 4-0 against the Grizz, which got him so much reverence. And I remember when Brent Vigen got hired, and I thought to myself, that's a great hire. I think that his background, his experience at NDSU, and some of the differences he has both in personality, coaching style, and mentality from Choate will be a good thing for this group of guys. And then I also thought to myself, Vigen is certainly the guy that could get the Cats over the top to the national championship. And then I also thought to myself, I wonder if that guy will ever beat the Grizz. And that's the dichotomy that we live in right now with this rivalry. I think that there's all sorts of different future scenarios we could get into, but I think there's a real scenario in which Brent Vigen wins multiple national championships at Montana State and never beats Bobby Hauck. And I know that's a hyperbolous thing I just said. You can never make that sort of prediction at this moment in time. But I'm mostly just like almost making fun of the narrative of how important this game has become in people's minds. And now, for the first time, at least in my 16 years covering the Big Sky, my 11 years covering Montana State, we really do have the hypothetical question that's been asked by both fan bases in this rivalry for years. Would you rather win the rivalry game or win the national championship? We are now 1 game away from that for Montana State. And so I'm just so fascinated to see how this plays out, because this will be podcast and talk radio fodder forever. Either way it is, but if Montana State pulls this thing out and they have a national championship run when getting whipped by the Grizz in Missoula, it's going to make that question is going to linger for all time.
This is the first time that a team has ever even made it to the national championship after losing Cat Grizz, right?
This is the first time that the loser of the brawl has advanced farther than the winner of the brawl since 2003.
Wow.
And yes, to answer your question, this is the first time that a loser of the Cat Grizz game has advanced to the national championship? Yes, because the Grizz, all 7 of their appearances, they beat the Cats.
It's such a crazy game in terms of the importance in the playoff implication, because it's like, it most likely it's always going to be a top 10 matchup or a top 15, or it should be. Like, that's what it always should be. We were talking about it on our podcast, like if the Cats lose this game in like October, the Cats are probably still like a 3 or 4 seed. We lose that game in the last game of the season. We go all the way down to the 8th seed from a potential. People are talking about the Cats as a number 1 seed if they win Cat Grizz, and all of a sudden we're all the way to 8th with 1 loss on the road to a top 6 program.
Right. Let me float this to you. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know you guys have a lot to get to. And this is something you can fall all the way down the rabbit hole. But this is my other thought when I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks of this barren wasteland, like you guys have said, with no content. And what if they moved the Cat Grizz game to the first weekend of November and there was still 2 to 3 regular season games after it?
I'm a fan.
Because it would have much less of an impact on the national seeding. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it would still be a big deal. It probably wouldn't be the same Montana's Super Bowl, like, this ultimate end of the season event. But I mean, either way, let's say that the exact game that happens, but then the Cats get to go win 3 in a row, go to the playoffs. Then they still probably play their way back all the way into the top 4.
Yeah. So the Saturday happened in Missoula. We all watched it. Ryan and I podcasted that.
The worst podcast ever.
Which
I believe was also our 100th episod. Worst 100th episode of all time.
All right.
But this is why fan podcasts are great, though, because the Grizz fan podcast said that their post-Cat Grizz podcast was the best podcast they've ever done.
It's the first time we've done this where we lost one. So we had to do
right?
that.
No kidding. I think that was the same sentiment from them as the first time they've done it when they won one, right?
That's kind of funny how that works out.
So then the second question to talk about then is, like, how did losing that propel the Cats to make changes? Obviously, we know about Matt McKay and that coming out the week after. But, like, to me, when I see the Cats play post-Cat Grizz game, there's something distinctly different. Is it all just Tommy Malott? I just don't know.
Well, I think it's an empowerment of the entire locker room. I mean, so as I mentioned, this is my 11th season covering the Cats. And I was going to be hard-pressed to find a group of guys that I had a better collective relationship with, as well as more long-lasting relationships with, than the first group of Cats that I covered. Like, when I first moved to Bozeman in 2010 to work at the Chronicle, and then I first launched Bobcat Beat, and I was doing the Montana State Magazine with Felix Marquez. That group of guys, Cody Kirk, I mean, he grew up with my brother. Tanner Bluskin played against my brother his whole life. Like, Denarius McGee, Shane Robinson, Mike Ryder, Mike Person, all those dudes. That was the first team I covered. And those guys were Big Sky champs each of the 3 years. And we had great relationships. But also, at that moment in time, I was of a similar age as them. I was only a couple of years older than them. I'd only been out of college for 2 or 3 years. And so then a lot of those guys, like Shane Robinson, stuck around in Bozeman. He became one of my good friends. We played CMV hoops. We played in golf league together. Played slow pitch softball. All that stuff. So those guys were special to me because they were successful and because they were kind of the first group I covered. But also because they were my peers, and then they became my friend. Mikey Ryder's another guy. Like, we became good friends after he graduated, and he helped me become friends with Bobby Daly, and all those things have played so much into the success of my career. But this group is going to be hard to beat ever, because these guys, they came in with choke and they endured all the things that have happened over the last 5 or 6 years. And, I covered them they're the first group of the Skyline Sports era that we covered, from recruiting stories when they committed to now senior profiles. And for guys like Lewis Kidd, like that, it took 6 years for that to come to fruition, right? Like, I remember sitting in the airport with Ty Okada's parents like 5 or 6 years ago when he was first thinking about coming to Montana State. So we know these guys so well. And so, I mean, that's where this group is just so special because of that, right? Like, these guys, but they also just have that's what I'm saying is, like, I know these guys so well because I've talked to them so many times. And so to answer the question, it's not just Tommy Mellott, it's the galvanization of the locker room. Like, I could tell that there was some resentment. Resentment's not the right word. That's too harsh. But there was not this collective sense of belief in the leadership or lack thereof of Matt McKay. And I think that no one on the team was playing with the edge and swagger that is the top potential of what they could when Matt McKay was the quarterback. And you could see just how frustrated Troy Anderson was at the postgame press conference in Cat Grizz when he was sitting next to Matt McKay. And I think Matt McKay if you're the starting quarterback for a top 5 team, you're going to get a lot of shine. Doesn't matter if you play well, okay, or bad. Everybody in the media wants to talk to the quarterback after every game. Like, that's the for sure in the postgame press conference, right? You're getting the head coach, the quarterback, and then whatever 3 other players you can think of. And so you get a lot of shine for it. And I think that Matt McKay was getting a lot of shine for being pretty average, pretty mediocre. But more than anything, I don't think he was galvanizing any of his teammates in any sort of leadership fashion. And I'm not trying to pile on the kid. I know that he's been going through some personal stuff. I mean, he was out at Montana State from Raleigh, North Carolina. I mean, he's the only dude, I think, in the history of MSU football from North Carolina to earn a letter. So, he's a long ways from home. He's almost 3,000 miles from home. So, and you never know anybody's personal situation, whatever. That's not what I'm getting into. All I'm saying is that knowing these guys as well as I do, talking to each one of them, the guys that are the old guys that are the leaders of this team, Lewis Kidd, Taylor Tuiasosopo, Troy Anderson, Ty Okada, Daniel Hardy, Amandre Williams, every single one of those guys, to a man, when you ask them about Tommy Mellott, they light up. The fact that he was training like a position player for almost full 2 years during this COVID shutdown, now all of a sudden, like, this dude is earning the respect of Ty Okada. Like, this dude can squat as much as Callahan O'Reilly. I mean, that's like, I'm just using that as, that's not an actual fact. I don't know that actually. So I think Callahan O'Reilly's pretty strong, but you guys know what I'm saying. Like, sure. Tommy Mellott he was lifting like a safety, and he was playing special teams. He's doing all these things. So then when he slips into quarterback, and you already have this defensive-minded team with all these senior leaders, most of whom either play defense or on the offensive line, and you add this toughness element to it, and then, oh, by the way, this kid from the mining city catches lightning in a bottle harder than any player I've ever seen in my career covering sports. And boom, here we are. And we have this magical run all the way to the national championship. So that's a long-winded way of saying, though, like, it isn't just Matt McKay and Tommy Mellott. It's the whole fabric of the whole team. But it makes sense when you really break down, like, why this dynamic happened and why the Cats just took off into the stratosphere. And I really think no matter what happens to Brent Vigen's career at Montana State, that decision to have those onions, to bench your starting quarterback who just went 9-2 and go with a straight true freshman who is your 5th string quarterback in the spring, that is one of the craziest and one of the most admirable coaching decisions I've ever seen in my career covering the Big Sky Conference.
This is a question that I've been wanting to ask, and I don't think I've heard too many people talk about. Obviously, it's worked out. Tommy Mellott was a great choice, but why didn't the Bobcats go with Tucker Rovig?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I think it's been – man, how do we say this gently? Because I do think that first, I guess, before I go into the bluntness of the way I'm going to answer that question, I will say that if you were to rank your top 10 David Letterman style factors of the Montana State going to the national championship, I would say one of those 10 factors is Tucker Rovig, his leadership, and his selflessness. Like, make no mistake, Brent Vigen and Taylor Housewright are the quote-unquote quarterbacks coaches. Tucker Rovig's the quarterbacks coach. Like, Vigen's doing head coaches stuff on the sidelines, and Housewright's up in the box calling plays. The dude who's talking to Tommy Mellott on the sidelines and coaching him is Tucker Rovig. The dude who's giving the plays into the huddle is Tucker Rovig. So, like, he deserves all the credit in the world. Like, they honestly should just put him on salary. Like, they should just pay him because he is he's straight up the quarterback's coach. And so I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. But also, like, for what Jeff Choate wanted, which is he just wanted a quarterback who could call the play and do an effective cadence and be a good leader on and off the field from a personality standpoint, Tucker Rovig was perfect. From a quarterback standpoint, I mean, it's not a coincidence or a mistake that Tucker Rovig was like basically the 4th string quarterback in the spring. And if you were really being real about it, he was the 5th string because he was never going to actually stay ahead of Mellott. but he was definitely behind McKay and Casey Bauman and Blake Thielen, and probably on par with Tommy Mellott. So, again, Rovig came to play for a coach that thought he was the perfect guy for their system, and he went to the semifinals of the playoffs, and he won 12 or 13. I mean, how about this? I'm pretty sure Tucker Rovig won as many games as a starter as Dakota Prukop, and Dakota Prukop's a pro and a Big Sky legend. So, Tucker Rovig has nothing to hang his head about. I think he's had a phenomenal career, and I actually think he's one of the MVPs of this Bobcat team. But quite frankly, they didn't go with Tucker Rovig because Tucker Rovig was never even in the consideration of being good enough to play for Brent Vigen.
It's kind of crazy. A guy who was in the semifinals, like you would think that'd be an obvious choice if you're all of a sudden needing a quarterback. I know that didn't happen that way, that McKay didn't transfer and then we had to find a quarterback. I know that's not how it worked. It's just kind of crazy that he wasn't even in the mix for a guy who had playoff experience, which is a rare thing, but they just believed in Tommy Mellott that much. So kudos. It was a big decision, and I give Brent Vigen and the staff a lot of credit for making that decision.
Absolutely.
Hey, Colter, I was just going to wonder, do you think that decision to, like you said, the Onions' decision to go to Mellott, do you think that did that do anything for Coach Vigen? Do you think the players trust him more? It's been such a hard thing to put our finger on. Brian and I talk about it all the time. It was like, what's the relationship with the team and Coach Vigen? Because it was really obvious with Coach Choate. Did that galvanize the team behind Coach Vigen?
Man, where do I even start with that? I think I'll start by saying that I've learned so much secondarily from Brent Vigen this year, and I've also then, from a second degree, because of what I've learned secondarily from Brent Vigen, learned so much about North Dakota State and their success over the last 10 to 12 years. And because there's such an arms race in Montana, and because Bobcat and Grizz football are such a big deal, and they really are one of the biggest exports of the state of Montana and all of that, among the most, if not the most famous men in the state of Montana are the head football coaches. And so then when you get a dude like Choate, who's like this extra worldly personality, and he's teaching you this, he's teaching football 400 every Monday while he's giving you his speech, but he's also like this unbelievable inspirer in the locker room and all that sort of stuff. You almost get drunk on the fact that I guess that's the best way to say it. He is intoxicating. I think that's why he appeals to young people and players and guys of our age demographic and older people too. And I think that Choate, his enthusiasm and the way he sold everything was so epic. But I've also learned so much from Vigen about how being deliberate and not being volatile and not being crazy and being tempered and disciplined and steady and having patience and all these things. I mean, they're great virtues to espouse in your life. And I don't think that Vigen won over the locker room right away. And I think he knew that, and I think he expected that. And I think he also had the incredible foresight and patience to know that it would come. And I think that he's taken it incrementally. It wasn't like it has to be by this date. It has to be by this date. It has to be by this date. But now they're not even a year into his formula, and they've gone farther than any team has in the last 4 decades. And so I think that in itself wins it over. I've been I said this on my radio show today, Monday, if you're listening, Monday the 3rd of January. And we're working on this profile on Troy Anderson, and I've honestly been collecting quotes and doing research and all the stuff since the summer of 2017, and I've never pulled the trigger on actually sitting down to write it. I think when I do, it'll just be probably a start to finish 2 hours of just remembering this unforgettable guy. But one of the quotes in there, it's a teaser, spoiler alert for later, but one of the quotes in there is from Jeff Choate, and he says, "Make no mistake about it, the 2021 season for Bobcat football does not happen unless Troy Anderson makes it happen. And it's not about him switching positions or learning to play in the middle of the defense or quarterbacking the defense or being the Big Sky Conference Defensive Player of the Year or maybe even being the Buck Buchanan Award winner or being the biggest freak that Montana State's seen or any of that. It's not playing both sides of the ball. It's none of that stuff. Troy Anderson brought this whole thing together, and he didn't let anybody leave. Nobody transferred. I mean, that's the irony of the whole thing. Jeff Choate, I did the numbers. Jeff Choate averaged 28 guys leaving the program in the offseason. Every offseason, he was Montana State's head football coach. 9 dudes left when Choate left and Vegan took over. 9. There were some other roster decisions to fill, make room for transfers that were, from the coaching staff's perspective. But in terms of dudes leaving the program, 4 times less than when Choate was there left. But that has nothing to do with Vegan. Or that has nothing to do with anything besides Troy Anderson. And so, that's, as much as we could ever say about him, that's what makes him so special is the fact that he can get everybody, including grown men who are college football coaches, to follow him. That's like the biggest compliment you can give the kid. But I guess to answer your question, like Vegan has done a tremendous job of biding his time to win it over. And now all the decisions he's made are coming to fruition. And I think everybody's all in and everybody knows the formula fully works, but you can't understate the fact that this whole thing happened because of Troy as well.
It does seem sometimes like Vegan is playing 4D chess or playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers, I guess you could say. Like he just always has a vision for the future. He seems really intelligent when he's talking. Like he's not like he's holding back. Like he just knows things that you don't. And that clearly was his formula. Like, all right, we're going to do this. You guys might not like it. When we're in Frisco, you're going to like it. And that's kind of seemed to be how it kind of played out. And I kind of want to shift a little bit towards that playoff push that the Cats.
Can I make just two quick points there? One, because Vegan is so tempered and really he's not inflammatory. He's not really that. I always think he's not charismatic because he is charismatic because he's an excellent speaker. But you know what I mean? Like he's distinctly different than Choate. But I will say too. That's exactly right. but I will say this though, like watching the pre and post game stuff of him in the locker room that they post on Instagram and stuff that Garrett Becker and those guys do. Vegan's got an edge. Like what Vegan says to the media is very calm and cool and collected, whatever. But like when he's doing his pregame and his postgame, like he's funny, man. Like he is a very good coach. You can definitely tell that.
No, you could definitely. I love the videos that they put out because it definitely shows a side of it you don't see. Because you just watch the press conferences and like, all right, it's just a coach speak there. But he gets pretty rah. He gets in guys' faces. He gets fired up. That one where it pans over at the semifinal game after the hook and ladder, like the second hook and ladder in a row by South Dakota State or whatever, and he's just fired up and he's like yelling like get down after he recovers the fumble. Like that's what you like to see. Like that makes me happy as a fan to realize there is that side of him because you worry about that. Like is he just kind of vanilla all over the place? But no, he's definitely got that fiery edge.
Right,
sure.
Right. Well, one other report, not to make a jab at Bobcat fans, but you guys are all scared of coaches being vanilla and non-rah-rah because that was Rob Ash's biggest weakness. But there's a definitive way to win football games, even if you aren't Jeff Choate. It's true. But one last quick story on this note. This struck me when it happened in person, and it's resonated with me throughout the rest of this football season as well. When Brent Vegan did his, I guess it was his second press conference. It was after he'd gotten hired, and it was I don't know. It was a press conference some months ago, and I asked him a question. It was a fitting question for the timing, if this makes sense. I asked him, you worked for Coach Bull, Craig Bull, from 2003 all the way until last year. 16 years. What'd you learn from him about being a head coach? And Brent Vegan said. He sort of chuckled in his typical North Dakota Brent Vegan way. and then he said, the number one thing I learned from Coach Bull is that a program is bigger than you and you never make the program about any one individual, especially yourself. And I thought at the same time that was, if you want to take it like this, that was a veiled shot at both Jeff Choate and Brent Vegan, or Jeff Choate and Bobby Houck, excuse me. But more importantly, though, and Freddie Banks echoed this too, and Freddie Banks has those same NDSU roots. When I first interviewed him, he said, "Hey, this place is haunted by ghosts. Like, there's championship banners hanging from the rafters dating back to 1963, which is 27 years before Freddie Banks was even born. Like he said, we're just a part of this story. Our responsibility is just to carry on the tradition of Sonny Holland and Jim Sweeney and the great coaches that came before. And, there's 18 Big Sky Conference banners hanging for Bobcat football. They got 3 national championships. No one is creating the winning culture at Montana State. You're either trying to reattain it or maintaining it. That's it. And that's something that comes from NDSU. And so, that's just the other point I would make, is that I think Deegan has understood so much that leading prestigious and prominent and important programs like Montana State, that opportunity is finite, but the program and all of that lives forever.
Alpine Touch is legendary around the state of Montana for providing delicious seasonings for every grilling occasion. Now, Alpine Touch offers so much more, from a savory new barbecue sauce to spicy pepper blends to tasty barbecue rubs. In addition to the classic, Alpine Touch has a variety of seasoning salts for whatever you need to spice up. Now that the holidays are over, Alpine Touch makes a perfect thank you gift to show your friends and relatives you love them. Alpine Touch, available at retail locations around Montana or online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
So how exactly, and let's just shift back to some, I guess, on the field stuff here. How did the Bobcats, UT Martin's one thing. I think we could have beat UT Martin probably with Matt McKay, with anybody at the quarterback. How did the Cats go down to Huntsville and take out the number 1 seed? And how did they come back to Bozeman and take out South Dakota State, who was a team that I thought was going to give the Cats a lot of trouble? How have the Cats been able just to sustain this high level of play so far that we just hadn't seen? Is it like we talked about, is this all Tommy Mellott, or do they change some schemes around? Like, what's going on here?
What do you mean that you hadn't seen? They were the number 3 team in the country before they got beat by Montana.
Yeah, but we had been slipping at that point, I guess you could say. Like, we struggled to beat Idaho State and Idaho.
Because of one thing, though, right?
Is it all Matt McKay and Tommy Mellott? Is that literally the only change?
Montana State was slipping because of a couple of things. All right, first let's talk schematics. They were underperforming at quarterback. Here's the thing. Let's think about this. Lance McCutcheon, and I'm writing this story later this week, SkylineSportsMT.com, is arguably, and I think almost definitively, having the greatest single season for a receiver in Montana State history, at least statistically. He's approaching Sam McCollum's single season record for touchdowns in the year. If he has even a decent outing in Frisco, is going to set the single season record for receiving yards in the year. He's averaging 20-something yards per catch. He's been unbelievable. He would have 600 to 800 more receiving yards this year if Matt McKay threw even a kind of good deep ball. Montana State took shots on the first play of the game, the first play of the half, and every single change of possession this entire year when Matt McKay was the quarterback. And I bet you if you did the statistical analysis, they hit 25% of those. McCutcheon was wide open on opening game or opening half shots. Literally 9 out of 10 times they'd throw them, and they hit probably 3 of those.
I want to shift real quick while you're talking about this. Do you think Tucker Rovig throws a better deep ball than Matt McKay? You think he could have had a better season if Tucker Rovig's just throwing sideline fades to or Lance McCutcheon all game?
Yeah, maybe. And that's the other factor about Tommy Mellott is, what does Butte High do under Ari Gray, the former Bobcat? They run the straight up zone read air raid. It's one of the most unique offenses I've ever seen. It is RPO with the quarterback, the running back, and a potential keeper. But if the quarterback decides to pass in the RPO in that scheme, the only throw is the back shoulder fade. They don't run slants. They don't run any of that stuff. And that's why Dallas Cook and Tommy Mellott are 2 of the most prolific quarterbacks in Montana State football history. High school, that is. Because they throw the back shoulder fade. That's the other irony about Tommy Mellott, is that he still has a long ways to go developing as a quarterback. He can't throw a tight end shtick or an inside post or a short slant very well at all right now. But he can throw the back shoulder fade better than almost anybody I've seen in a long time. So that's a huge advantage as well. But anyway, sorry, I interrupt.
No, that's all right. I interrupted you. We were talking about Lance McCutcheon there. Talking about the greatest season in Bobcat history.
I do have a quick question. As
Sure.
we were talking about that, do you think we're going to need to see more out of Malott in the championship game in order to win that? Because for me, I always think we need to pass over the middle and do other things that we're not doing. I was just interested on your take there.
Yeah, well, but to finish answering that first question about how they routed Sam Houston State and South Dakota State, I mean, first of all, teams within the league, you get to watch the film twice as much because so many times you're preparing for this team, but Montana State's on the other side. You know what I'm saying? So, like,
Sure.
Idaho and Montana. So here's the thing. Troy Anderson is Paul Bunyan, right? But he's not immortal. He does have weaknesses. I actually think that Troy Anderson is the worst inside linebacker in the league when it comes to getting caught in the mess. Like, that's what the old school OCs would tell you.
Yes.
Like when you get caught in the mess and you have to hand fight, right? Troy Anderson's not very good at getting off blocks. Like if you pull a guard and run gap scheme right at him, Troy Anderson gets knocked on his ass pretty frequently.
I've seen Troy Anderson get knocked on his butt several times. Like,
yeah.
I don't make. I keep those comments to myself, but like, oh, Troy got completely flattened right there.
It's true, and I also know that so many people that are listening to this are Bobcat people. So I'll tell this story. I know this secondarily because I have connections, I guess. But after the Cactus game, Bobby Houck at Quarterback Club showed like a 6-play cut up of all the things the Grizz did to isolate Troy Anderson and exploit the few things that he's bad at. But Troy Anderson is the Big Sky MVP and the Buck Buchanan Award winner because he can do things that I've never seen done in college football at any level. Like Montana State beat Eastern Washington because Troy Anderson can switch from Mike linebacker to playing a true nickel and guard the best receiver in the Big Sky Conference and shut him down. That's an unbelievable thing. He gets no statistics for that at all. I think he had 1 tackle in the second half of the Eastern Washington game. But he also shut down Talolo Limu-Jones, who's probably going to get drafted. And he's a linebacker. He's not a corner. He's not a nickel. So, like, that's the reason he wins Big Sky Conference Player of the Year. But also, if you're Paul Petrino and you're coaching for your job and you're down to your 4th-string quarterback and the only thing you got is this wildcat quarterback and a stud fullback who's probably going to the NFL and a really good offensive guard, what are you going to do? You're going to run straight up quarterback power, the guard pulling right at Troy Anderson, the 270-pound fullback following it up with a double team, and you're running Zach Borish right up the gut. And that's why Montana State looks so weird on that senior day. It's not just the Matt McKay thing. Like Idaho State did the same thing. Dedicate your entire offensive attack to getting Troy Anderson caught in the mess, because at least that way Troy Anderson's not going to just get a pick 6 and beat you. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things that went into it. But then when it comes to Sam Houston and South Dakota State, they don't have that same intimate knowledge, and they're treating Troy Anderson like a mere mortal because they've never seen him in live time. And so then he gets to just run free. And I mean, I think he played his 2 best games of his career. And part of that's just because that's who he is. Like, of course he's going to go out on top, but also those teams just weren't game planning for any of that stuff. I also think that Freddie Banks basically won Montana State, the Sam Houston, and the South Dakota State games. But I think more than anything, though, these dudes just believe. Like, that's what Coach Ty Gregorak on this podcast, on Big Sky Breakdown, has said week after week after week. He helped coach a lot of these guys. He helped recruit a lot of these guys. Like he's been saying, all those guys that are the leaders of Montana State, where they're at right now, this is no surprise at all. Like this is where they want to be. This is where their goals were to be. And if you're Daniel Hardy or Troy Anderson or Lewis Kidd or Isaiah Fonseca, like you're the best dude on the block every game you play, why wouldn't you think that, right? Like I said this on Nuanez Now Today. The number one question I've gotten over the last 2 weeks is, do the Cats have a chance? It's like, are you kidding me? Of course the Cats have a chance. The Cats have literally 9 of the best players in the United States of America. That gives you a chance against anybody. So, I mean, to answer your question, the reason that they won those games is more than anything, they buried the hatchet after the Grizz game. They have phenomenal coaching, but their dudes have superior talent, and all those dudes believe right now. And if you ask them right now, they're fulfilling their destiny.
I want to piggyback off of a question real quick, or a topic you brought up here real quick. Something we've noticed throughout the year, and especially in the playoffs, is I think Freddie Banks is one of the best I've seen in Bozeman at making second half adjustments. Is that something that you've seen too?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm sorry for all the Bobcat fans listening to this that Freddie Banks is a one and done, but also like that's all it was ever going to be.
Yeah,
like he's phenomenal, man. Like he's really, 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 really good. Like I think that he's really good. They've been as good on defense as you always wanted and knew Montana State could be. Because Montana State, that's the thing, is like people remember Travis Lulay and Denarius McGee and Dakota Prukop, but like MSU in the 21st century has been probably the most consistent defensive program in the league. And I'm saying that over the Grizz because the Grizz had several lulls when they went to these offensive head coaches. But like from those Pete Wachowski teams under Mike Kramer to, I mean, I know that Jamie Marshall fell off a lot too, but I mean, there's been as many iconic individual guys and units for the Bobcats for the last 19, 20 years as anybody in the league. And so still though, even those teams, they're so good and they flash their potential and they help them win games, but they're not like straight up lights out like this. I mean, this team's like giving up like 10 points per game, man. I mean, they've given up like 15 touchdowns in 15 games. It's crazy the numbers that they're putting up. And so much of that credit goes to Banks.
Yeah, we were hoping we realized about halfway through the season that Freddie Banks wasn't long for Bozeman. I was hoping to get more than 1 year out of him, but these things happen. That's kind of what you want, though. If you're a good FCS program, you basically have two choices. You get up and coming coaches, or you get kind of coaches on kind of the twilight of their career. That's just kind of how it goes sometimes, and that's what Cat's got.
And that's right. I mean, here's the thing: if you're a Division I defensive coordinator when you're like 30 years old, like Freddie Banks, or 31 years old, you're either like a prodigy and you're going to be big time ASAP, or the head coach that hired you has no idea what he's doing. You're going to be fired ASAP. There's no real in between.
Sure. Yeah, we were both pretty nervous when we hired two coordinators that had like pretty much zero experience calling plays between the two of them. But
right,
Freddie Banks certainly worked out. House Wright's not quite as confident in, but he's winning me over here lately. Tommy Lott's helping him out.
Hey, Colter, let's take a look at Frisco. Ryan and I are not in Montana, so we were just kind of wondering what's the buzz about this game in Montana, and kind of a secondary question: how's Butte responded to all this?
Oh man, well, first of all, on the Butte note, I mean, I could wax poetic for forever. I mean, I'm writing that's my big feature for the week is Montana State mining the mining city and how
I like it.
Butte America has given Montana State most, if not all, of its greatest football moments. You know, from Jim Sweeney to Sonny Holland to Sonny Lubick and that lineage of Butte. To Paul Dennehy in 1976 leading the Cats. I mean, Kelly Davis, one of the best players on the '84 Cats. Like on and on and on. And I think it's so fitting now that. Yeah, I mean, I can't say too much because I don't want to ruin the whole narrative of my story. But like, there's a statue of Sonny Holland in front of the stadium, and all these guys touch it. Yeah. And like now, the kid who's going to lead them to the promised land again is from Butte. Like, it's just amazing, and like that confluence of events and all of it to happen is just so crazy. But I mean, I'll let you in on a little angle of my personal life, I guess. Marcus Farrader, who played for the Cats, was a senior in 2019, Butte Central kid. His oldest brother, Stephen Farrader, is one of my best friends and has been one of my best friends forever. So I know Marcus really well, and that's why I always really wanted to tell Marcus his story. I mean, he was a good player for the Cats, and he played a good role his junior and senior years. But I give him a little more attention for two reasons. One, because I knew him, and he's one of my best friend's brothers, but also just because the story of Butte and the richness of that culture is so awesome. It's so as Bill Lamberty always says, Butte tells its story better than anybody. And I didn't have much time with him, but I got about 90 minutes with Steve and Marcus Farrader over the Christmas break. And we were just talking about Touchdown Tommy and all the things. And those guys are just over the moon about it. And, it's like Steve said, he was like, man, Tommy Mellott encompasses like all the good characteristics of all the great athletes I ever knew from Butte, like all wrapped up into one. And I mean, that's so cool, man. Like, and he's got this whole army behind him, and it's Butte America, and like the fact that it dates back to the greatest Bobcat of all time, and it's just so rich in its story. So I think that it's just an amazing part of it. But that's the Tommy Watt answer. What was the first part of the question, though?
Just how Montana is reacting towards it.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thing, because I live in such an interesting world, because with all my sales responsibilities, as well as, the fact that I cover both Montana and Montana State fiercely and with so much passion and I really always try to keep it even. That's why it's so funny when all these arguments on Bobcat Nation that Egriz break out, like with Colter went to the University of Montana, he's a Grizz, but then all the Grizz people are like, oh, well, he worked in Bozeman for 8 years, he's a Cat. And it's like, truly, I want nothing but the best. If the Cats and the Grizz can play in the national championship for the rest of the time, that's not only so good for me on a personal level, but that's so good for my business. Like that would be what I want. I don't have any emotional investment in any of it. I just love being a part of it. I love all my connections on both sides of it. But it's been very interesting to me, talking to my colleagues and the people that I work with and a lot of my advertising clients, and a lot of those people are in Missoula, like the Grizz fan pod guys, both Mike Nugent and Brett Wahlberg are great friends of mine. I spend a lot of time with those guys all the time. And they both advertise on my show. I mean, they're as big Grizz fans as there is. Obviously, they have a whole podcast just like you guys.
Yeah, they're all right.
But but that's why, like I was telling you guys off the top, like that's why I think that you guys and those guys, you guys are doing great stuff with your podcast, because you guys have so much passion for it. You have a fan angle, but it's not irrational. You guys have a rational view on it, and that's cool. And it makes it entertaining to listen to and worthwhile to listen to too. But anyways, just like talking to those guys, like they were saying, from like a fierce passion standpoint, like it would hurt me a little bit. I'd have a little salt in my mouth if the Cats won. But like on the other hand, just from a story perspective, from a cultural perspective, just from like our communities and stuff, like what we would talk about, like it's pretty cool, man. Like, it's like I was saying, when you sit up there, if you're watching that Troy Anderson talking a lot press conference and you can't feel at least a little bit of emotion about some part of it, like you might be dead, man. Like it's an awesome thing. It's definitely an awesome thing. But I think the state of Montana, by and large, is really rooting for the Cats, because I think that the expectation for these two schools, as it should be, because of the resources and the interest and the fan base and the local talent that comes up in Montana and the quality of high school football coaches in Montana, like these two schools, the expectation should be that they're in the Final 8 or the Final 4 of the FCS playoffs every year, especially with all the teams that are moving out. Like that should be the expectation. The Elite 8, I think, is the baseline. That's where it should be for both Montana and Montana State. Okay. And so, I think that most people are proud of the Cats for getting to this point. And I'll say this on my Monday show, I always have Marty Morningweg on the show. He's an NFL coach for 25 plus years, and he played quarterback for the Grizz in the early 1980s, but he also runs a quarterback camp for a lot of the best Montana guys every summer. And so he's coached guys like Carson Rossat and Caden Hewitt on the Montana side of things, but he also coached Tommy Millott at that camp. And he always keeps up with Tommy. He wrote Tommy a card, over the holiday, just wish him the best of luck. And Marty was on today too, and he's like, he's always playing a shtick. He's Coach Marty, and he played for the Grizz and all that stuff. But he was like, hey man, I gotta tell you, like, don't matter if I'm a Grizz or whatever. He said, I'm saying go Cats on Saturday. Like, I want Montana State to win. So I think that by and large, the story is just so good, it can't be denied. So I think most people are behind Montana State.
You mentioned something that you're talking about, like both programs should kind of be always in this conversation. Just kind of what do you think about it just seems fitting to us that as an institution that Montana State has made it to Frisco. Just what do you think about the rise of Bobcat athletics and kind of the growth of Bozeman and all the institutional momentum going on all at the same time and this kind of converging here with the Bobcats making it to the national championship?
Well, and I know you guys both follow Bobcat Nation, the message board, and you follow the Skyline Sports Twitter. And that's why I thought it was important, even if it didn't fit into the specifics of any of the written stories we had or the press conferences or, all the multimedia content. I thought it was important to publish independently that picture that my brother took of Wade Cruzado, the president of Montana State. And, because I thought somebody on Bobcat Nation, I can't remember who it was, but they made such a good comment. They said, if you really break this down to its essence, to the nuts and bolts, to the salt and pepper of it, she's the reason that this is happening. And that's true. And I've thought about that so much. Like in my career as a journalist, I always think about like my most people will describe my job as a sports writer, a sports reporter, and a radio broadcaster, daily talk show host, those sort of things. But really, like when I think about it as my obligation as a journalist, I consider this job covering higher education and state politics, because two of the most highly employed and visible state employees in Montana are the head football coaches, and checks and balances are they're a necessity for that to be a reality, and to stay between the ditches. But when it really all comes down to it, like attitude reflects leadership, and leadership is everything. And when you really boil it down, you can account for Washington Grizzlies Stadium and Dave Dickinson and all these different things for the rise of the University of Montana. But in reality, it was George Dennison and his leadership to make the University of Montana this flagship and all of the things that it became when it was at its peak. And since he's died, Montana's had such a huge erosion. But part of that erosion has also been spurred on by the fact that Wider Cruzado is one of the most peerless leaders I've ever seen in my life. And like, I think she should run for president of the United States. Like, I would absolutely vote for her. You know what I mean? Like, she's just so charismatic and driven and smart and all of those things. And that's why we tweeted that picture of her celebrating after they won, because when it really all boils down to it, she got the south end zone bowled in. She got the new turf. She raised that money. She raised the money for the new scoreboard. She financed the Bobcat Athletic Center. I mean, at the end of the day, she fired Rob Ash, and she made sure Andy Hill didn't get hired, and she hired Jeff Choate, and she gave the blessing for Bennett Deegan. She's even hired all the coaches. Like, everything that's happened in Montana State over the last 15 years is because of Wider Cruzado, and I think that she deserves as much credit as anybody that we're sitting here doing this podcast and that we're sitting here with Montana State going to the national championship.
Yeah, Wadad's going to be traveling down there. We're going to be traveling down there. Bobcats are traveling down there. We know you're traveling down there. Man, it's such an exciting time to be a Bobcat fan. I'm sure it's exciting being part of the media, to getting to cover it. But let's shift the gears a little bit to Frisco. We're not going to talk about the game too much. We already touched a little bit about the Bison, if we can beat them, all that stuff. We're all traveling down there. First thing, I want to make sure that that we're going to make sure you get your Happy Meal down there. We'll get you your beer and your shot down there. All right, we'll get you covered there. But I do want to ask.
Well, I'm just praying that we get down there. After I heard about the fiascos of this last weekend, I'm like freaking out.
Well, that's what we're leading into. You were telling us a little bit before we started recording about some of the travel booking shenanigans that you may have come into. So why don't you tell us a little bit about getting down to Frisco?
Well, so the post-game press conferences for these playoff games are always so interesting for a variety of reasons. But first of all, because it's an NCAA sanctioned event, it's required that both teams go, and it's required that the visiting team goes first. Well, when you have a game like South Dakota State on a couple Saturdays ago, SDS the game's over, and of the 30,000 people in and around the arena, 1,000 of them are SDSU people. Nobody else is there on that behalf. So they go do their, brief locker room meeting or whatever. But you're not going to, no coach is going to waste time ripping their teams to shreds when the season's just over. It's just like hey, Chick-fil-A's on the way. We'll break it down on Monday in our exit meetings or whatever. And so it's always crazy because, I've been a part of a couple of these. And so I always leave the press box and go down there because I know there's going to be like an on-field celebration, right? You can get some videos, and also you can just feel the energy, feel the moment, all that stuff. But it's always like this timing thing, because that the visiting team, if they're the ones that lost, are going to be in that post-game press conference as soon as possible and be out of that post-game press conference as soon as possible. So I was able to be on the field with Montana State and everybody celebrating and all that for probably 10, 12 minutes. That's it. And I shook Dan Davies' hand. I shook Leon Costello's hand. Shook Bill Lamberty's hand. And, gave a couple knucks to a couple of my favorite guys on the team. And then just went to the press conference and interviewed the SDSU people. Okay, all right. But then for the home team, if they're the ones celebrating, especially like that, when they're just going to the national championship game, they're going to take a long time. And it's the only loophole in those NCAA administered press conferences where there's like this, that you don't have to obey the cool off rule. Like when you're at the NCAA basketball tournament, there's a timer. And so you got to be in there within 15 minutes or within half an hour of the game, depending on if you won or lost. And if you don't, it actually is an NCAA violation. You can actually get like a little bit of a minor fine for that. Well, the loophole for football exists. So all of that's a long-winded way of saying that SDSU went in the press conference, and then there was probably a 30 to 40-minute time period before Brent Vigen and Tommy Millott and Troy Anderson and Daniel Hardy and Amandre Williams came to the postgame for Montana State. And so we're sitting there in the new Bobcat Athletic Center, which, by the way, if the listeners or you guys haven't been in there, it's beautiful. It's awesome. And they're hosting the press conference in the team room now. So that's pretty slick. And it's got all sorts of state-of-the-art sound. And it's awesome. It's been a great upgrade. But you kind of get the cadence of what's going on. The people are about to come in. So Brooks and I, my brother Brooks and I from my business partner, Skyline Sports, we started looking at flights. And there was like 20 minutes where we looked at them and then we refreshed it. And the flights almost doubled in 20 minutes. And then by the end of the press conference, I'm looking at them as we're driving back to Missoula, and they've doubled again. And because there's direct flights from Missoula and Bozeman, they're relatively affordable. Well, they doubled and doubled and doubled. And so finally, by the time I'm done writing my story and we're about pulling into Missoula, I'm like, dude, I got to pull the trigger. We're going to spend our entire retirement on this trip. So we finally got the deal. Part of it's because Brooks and I both have other jobs outside of Skyline, and neither one of us could leave until Friday. But still, it was hilarious. Part of that is a testament to the fact that there are those direct flights, but also part of it was the fact that Bobcat fans were smashing. They were eating up those tickets, and so it was driving supply and demand. So, even though I was sort of frustrated by the expense, it was actually kind of cool to see, just the desire and everybody eating those up. What's your guys' travel plans?
Well, kind of funny. The same thing happened to even from Seattle when the Bobcats was after South Dakota State won and the Bobcats won, and then they were going to host another semifinal game. The same thing happened where I was looking at flights, and they basically went up to $1,200 from Seattle to Bozeman for a semifinal game. And I was like, I just don't know if I want to spend that much money. But going back to Frisco, we were both like supremely confident. I actually booked flights, which with the American Airlines, you can hold it up to 5 days for like $10. You pay $10 to hold the price for 5 days. I did it all on like Thursday. I booked flights, I booked hotels, I bought the tickets all on Thursday before James Madison even played North Dakota State, because I'm like, I learned my lesson on the South Dakota State thing. Like, things went so crazy and the tickets went so fast for that semifinal game. Like, I'm not going to have this happen to me for the national championship game. If I have to eat some tickets, like one ticket, I can hold the airline prices. So I got in on everything, and I'm doing pretty good. I got half my flight booked with miles, so I'm doing pretty good on that front. But I know Foley had a little hard time booking a flight, but he's also coming from Spokane versus Seattle. But yeah, we got hotel booked. We're gonna go on Friday, and I don't know what we're gonna do yet. We're just gonna soak it all in, and I know we're gonna get tailgating early on, and that's really the only plan we have at the moment. Maybe try and do a live show down there in some capacity. I don't know. All right. Well, there's travel plans. We'll definitely have to meet up with you down there. I'm looking forward to that. But before we get out of here, Colter, I want to ask: do you have any questions for us or anything you want to ask us before we get out?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to know what you guys think of this whole thing. Like, first of all, I want to know about just you two specifically, because I feel like when Jeff Choate left, it was a crazy moment for anybody that has been invested in Bobcat football, and I think that's like a true testament to how compelling he is, Like I still talk to Choate all the time because I just think he's such a unique character, you know? Like he can give you a sermon about anything if you just prompt him, and it's unbelievable. And I just think that he had such a reverence among the Montana State faithful. So take me through what you guys were thinking when Choate was a finalist at Boise State, and then he got hired at Texas. Were you guys freaking out?
I'm gonna let Floyd take this one because I know he's been a bit more emotional on the subject than I have. So I'll let you go first, Floyd.
Well, I feel like I remember that day vividly. I think it was our friend Brent Wahlberg texting us on the Twitter thread, hearing things about Choate.
Brent.
And I was at work. I was teaching at the time, and I started sweating, like legitimately started sweating. Brows started getting wet, pits started, getting wet. And I was like, no, here it comes. And you just always had the feeling that Jeff Choate was antsy for the next job. And then, so he doesn't get the job, and everybody's like, heck yeah, yeah, he's staying. And then I just kind of, felt it. He was like, he's gone. So I remember talking to Alex Eshelman about this. It just legit felt like a breakup. Like there was the full on stages of.
That's good.
She's referenced
that on my ESPN show too. It's a great analogy.
And honestly, Colter, it lingered for me probably for a lot of the year. I mean, almost until, to be honest with you, I don't feel like I've been a full-on vegan believer probably until Sam Houston State, if I'm legit honest with you. I love me some Jeff Choate. He was...
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's a father figure is what he is.
Yeah, exactly. You've talked about that.
That's exactly right, man. And it hits so close to home for me because I've said this on my podcast on Big Sky Breakdown and Nuanez now as well, but truly, man, first of all, Choate is so compelling and he's such a great teacher and speaker, but he also in some ways reminds me of my dad so much.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and I lost our dad about 7 years ago, and Choate was the guy, not in daily life or minutia or support or anything like that, but just in the heroism that where you can look up to an alpha male, because our dad was such an alpha, and Choate is so much like that. And some my brother and I have a whole notebook, a whole binder worth of sayings that my dad used to always say. And, it's like that book, Shit My Dad Says, right? But you could write a book, Shit Jeff Choate Says. and it reminded me so much of my old man and their backgrounds, working class, growing up in the middle of nowhere, logging and mining and all that stuff. And you seen Choate, he's got a crooked nose. Want to know why? Because he's been in bar fights. and I just love that guy. He's just he's so from the same essence as people from this part of the world. And so I agree, man. I was like, what's happening? Montana State, like we mentioned earlier, has so much institutional momentum, and Wader Cruzado's so great. And I think Leon Costello was exceptional. And they inherited, there was this roster that was stacked. So everybody was talking about, well, how the Cats going to react to the coaching changes. I picked the Cats to win the league, and I voted the Cats number one in the country in my preseason media poll. I thought this was happening all along, just straight up based on talent. They got Troy Anderson, everybody else doesn't. That's a huge advantage. But all that said, though, I totally agree with you. When Choate left, that was a weird moment. That was a crazy moment in time. That was it was just the uncertainty. It wasn't as if it was doomsday. This whole thing's going to crash. It was just that guy was so cool to be around. What are we going to do after this?
I think for me, I was just more worried about the program without Jeff Choate, because Jeff Choate, for all his great qualities, was a bit about himself in some ways. So he kind of made the program about him. So if everything is like he's the linchpin of everything that's gone well for the Bobcats, and he's gone now, and the circumstances of it irritated me at the time. Like if he would have gotten the Boise State job, I would have fully been happy for him because he applied for it. Like I knew he wanted a higher job. He's a Boise State alum, right? Like he was a Boise State alum. Like that was just one of his, that's like the dream jobs for him, so to speak. Like a really good G5 job. And he didn't get that job. I was like, all right, here we go. All right, we get him for another year. And then he's just like all of a sudden gone to be Texas. Like Texas, why Texas? Like that just seems, all of his coaching tree stuff is all Pacific Northwest, and he just goes for Texas. It just seemed like this is about like,
It was PK.
yeah. I mean, I understand he
PK.
has some connections there, but it just seemed more about just getting out of Bozeman than it did getting some sort of dream job, and that's where it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, but that's also why. I mean, twofold though. Choate would never say this on the record, but Choate's also smart enough to know when you've hit your peak. Like,
Sure.
everything I just said glowingly about Choate, this team would not be in the national championship if Jeff Choate was the head coach.
We've wondered that, and then we were actually potentially going to ask something similar to that. I don't know if we want to go down that road, but
I mean, it's not even an extra tangent. It's just that, like everything we've talked about, and it's not a shot on Choate. It's that what this team needed, both in its collection of talent as well as its steady senior leadership, was a coach that was going to make it about the guys and not him. And that's a great thing. And that's not even a shot at Choate. That is, and I think Choate knew that too. Like, I truly think that Choate knew that this was the potential of the team if he stepped away. And I also know that he knows that he would be a legend if he stepped away without ever losing the Grizz and setting the table for this run. It's the best thing that could have happened to him and his legacy too.
yeah, going out on top 4-0 against the Grizz, like you're going to be pretty much a legend for forever, no matter what else you kind of did at that point. That's just kind of the reality of it in Bozeman, whether I like that or not. That's just kind of how it goes.
100%. 100%. I also have one last question for you guys. There was the picture that kind of went viral after the game. And I was sort of disappointed. Like, we had 3 photographers there, and they all took great pictures, and we had all sorts of great Twitter interactions and all that. But the photo that got the most play, and it's just not that I expected my guys to get this, but credit to Brandon Sullivan, who did get it for MTN Sports, is this picture of Brent Vegan shaking Jeff Choate's hand on the field, and Leon Costello was in the background. What did you guys think of that picture?
I mean, I thought it was awesome. I thought it was really cool that Jeff Choate was there, number one. Too. And just number 2, that he sought out Brent Vegan, and they all had a big handshake. And Leon Costello, I think, has been a big part of this. We talked a lot about Waded, but I think Leon Costello deserves a lot of credit as well. So I thought it was a really cool picture capturing everyone, and just a cool moment of I don't know, you could almost call that another passing of the guard, so to speak. Just kind of like, hey, thanks for taking the team that I helped build up to the next level that I was hoping that you could. I don't know, something along those lines. I thought it was pretty cool.
It was cool.
I think it probably also like settled some arguments amongst some Cat fans about just, Choate versus Vegan or Vegan versus Choate, and it was fitting for the moment. It was like it was a perfect cap to that game.
Yeah, it was such a interesting picture. I mean, there's so much depth to it, right? Like, so much depth. Because there was, I don't know, we could go so tangential on this. I don't even want to go down that road. But like, I mean, the dynamic of an athletic director and the head coaches of the revenue sports and who they hire, and like that dynamic. If there's a successful coach of a revenue sport that wasn't hired by said AD, like there's just so many different things that go into that. And I'm not trying to speculate any sort of weird or bad blood or whatever, but like the trend in college athletics now is that the AD hires the head coaches for the revenue sports. And if those head coaches aren't hired by the AD, unless they are absolutely elite successful, they're on their way out. And so like the fact that Choate was hired before Leon, and that Choate basically ran the athletic department when he was there. Like, and I'm not saying anything away from Leon Costello. I think Costello is amazing. I think like you said, he deserves all the credit in the world. let's just say it's hard to be Jeff Choate's boss because he's a very bullish guy, you know. Like, for example, they have head coaches meetings at Montana State, and like, let's make no mistake, Jeff Choate's running those things when he's going to those meetings, you know. So I don't know. I thought it was a photo with so much depth and so much awesomeness, and you know, that's the thing is like, I don't know if Brent Vegan's ever going to sit there and knock your socks off as like this Academy Award winning character in this movie or whatever, like Jeff Choate was. Like Jeff Choate was like really a movie character, but like in a lot of ways, Vegan is the answer, and he's also a way more perfect fit for Montana State. And I think that the most underrated part of this season is Brent Vegan. He deserves all the credit in the world for what he's been able to do. And that's the biggest testament to him, is that the reason it's an underrated part of this season is he hasn't wanted that at all. And that's why they're where they're at.
I also think big credit for Vegan as it's blending some of the retaining some of the staff with blending it with some of his own hires. I think he had like a perfect balance there that's really helped the Bobcats as well.
I mean, yeah, he knocked it out of the park. Like, their staff has been like almost flawless. I know Bobcat Nation was ready to burn Taylor House right at the stake for the second half of the year. But I think that retrospectively, you realize it was because they didn't trust the quarterback. And I'm not trying to pile on Matt McKay, but like Taylor Housewright had that Philly special that they ran against Sam Houston up his sleeve since week 6. And they didn't roll it out to the semis because they didn't trust the dude that was operating it. I mean, they had way more diverse play calling in the last 3 weeks than they had all year long.
Sure. Because
guess what? Housewright trusts his quarterback. I'll tell another just real quick story. The Saturday South Dakota State game, in the press box, the center press box is where the media sits. They got the radio guy, the home and away radio broadcast teams on either side, and the coaches' booths on either side of that. So you're two glass suites away from either of the coaches. And when Tommy Mellott threw that last touchdown to Lance McCutcheon, that back shoulder fade that was just money against South Dakota State, you could hear through 2 different press boxes Taylor Housewright scream, "That's what happens when I have a MF quarterback." And I was like, yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, there was certainly debate amongst us on this podcast. We're not smart enough, intelligent enough football minds to know what part of the offense was broken. Was it Housewright or was it McKay or was it both? But I think things have kind of cleared up a little bit in that department.
For sure, man. And like, enjoy it, man, because Tommy Mellott is spectacular. That's a moment in time. It's an unbelievable thing that we're watching right now.
Well, just to kind of wrap it up too a little bit, I think you speaking about the parallel kind of opened my eyes a little bit about how Vegan deserves so much credit. However, he doesn't want it to be about himself, and how that mirrors Tommy Mellott and Troy Anderson, both guys who are just about the business, but obviously don't want to be in front of the cameras, don't want to sit there answering the questions. I just think that's really cool putting that together.
It is. The thing about Tommy, though, is like, Troy is so funny because Troy is so sweet-natured, even though he's like such a badass, right? Like his nature is very sweet and kind, right? But he still is sort of, I don't want to even say adversarial. He's not like adversarial or like dismissive of the media, but like, you're right. You could kind of tell he's like, why am I doing this again? I also thought it was cool though. I asked him about, him being a Bobcat State for the last time and him sitting at that press conference for the last time. And then he like lit up and he's like, man, this actually is the last time. And then he like did his, he actually like let loose a little bit. But the thing that's so fascinating about Tommy though is that like, I don't even know how to describe it, man. Like you guys were saying, he's stone faced and you think he's like this stern character, but then you like ask him a question and he'll stare at you sort of blankly. And then he'll like look off into the ether. And the way he like articulates it doesn't have much enthusiasm to it. But then you like listen to it and you're like, what? This is perfect. What he said was just like spot on perfect. It's unreal. Like, it's actually unreal. Like, when I transcribed the quotes to just put it in the stories, it's like, who is this guy? Like, it's almost like he's having an out of body experience. Like, in the last couple of weeks, it's crazy to watch his performance on the field and just the way he's handled it all. Like, he is such a pro's pro. It's mind blowing. And that picture you guys posted with him sitting up to the mic and Troy sitting back with his arms crossed and just chuckling. It's like that's like one of the greatest pictures of all time. Seriously, it's so awesome to like watch that and to watch the way that Tommy Mellott has dealt with all this. It's incredible. It's awesome.
All right,
Tommy, the future. Oh, hold on, I just got to ask that. Okay. Is Tommy the future quarterback for the Bobcats?
Oh my gosh! See, no, we don't want to end this podcast on like a negative note.
Yeah,
I think Tommy Mellott is one of the great athletes I've seen in my career. Period. I think that Tommy Mellott's going to play an unbelievable amount of football for Montana State, no matter what. I think there's a significant chance it's as a quarterback, but I also think there's a significant chance it's not. I think they're going to out-recruit him in a lot. They're going to try to out-recruit him, which you should in this day and age of college football, especially if you're a quarterback guru like Brett Deegan. I think that the scuttle in the program is that Jordan Reed kid from Southern California that they got is the next of the sort of the prototypes. At least I'm not going to say he's going to be the next Josh Allen, but like he's the next prototype that Deegan's going to get a chance to mold. And so who knows what he becomes, but like that's an entry point for sure. And I also think that there's this stark reality that Bobcat fans are going to have to face after Saturday, in which Tommy Mellott truly did catch lightning in a bottle as much as anybody I've ever seen. And you know, I've heard from so many people, well, what if Tommy Mellott would have started all year? Nothing would have happened if Tommy Mellott started all year, because they wouldn't have been able to give him 34 carries against South Dakota State on December 18th of the semifinals of the playoffs with Isaiah Fonse on the bench. You know, like the timing was perfect, and the move was so calculated. Like Tommy Mellott, if he was getting 30 carries, you know, to beat Weber State October 16th, like that ain't happening. Like he's not playing and or completely limited by this point in the season. So I think the timing has been so perfect. And I also, like, at this point, how could you possibly bet against the kid? I mean, he's I think he's a football savant. I think that he is an unbelievable kid. I think he has such great perspective in his ability to handle all this stuff. He's going to be so empowered because, I mean, how could you not be empowered when your biggest fan is Troy Anderson, your second biggest fan is Ty Okada? I mean, like, these guys are like the biggest Tommy touchdown fans that there is, and they're the dudes in the big sky. So all that like caters to Tommy, but the stark reality that Montana State followers are going to have to face is that what Tommy Mellott has done these last 3 weeks and what he might do again on Saturday, like, there's going to be a stark fall from that because everybody's going to have a huge amount of time to prepare for him or whatever. But that said, that happens to every quarterback. That happened to Lamar Jackson. That happened to Russell Wilson. It happened to Patrick Mahomes this year. I mean, the Chiefs started 3-4. I thought Patrick Mahomes was on track to be the greatest quarterback of all time. I still think he is, but people figured out the formula to stop him, and they started 3-4. Then they figured it out, and they won 8 in a row. But like that's the penultimate moment of a quarterback's career, right? Is like right now, Tommy Mellott's got lightning in a bottle, and there's no game plan for him. By the time if he's the starting quarterback, or when he's the starting quarterback next year, no question is he going to take a huge dip early, only because teams are going to full on junk it up against him. But then what happens? How do you respond? Are you Robert Griffin, and once team figures you out, you fizzle? Johnny Manziel, once teams figure you out, you fizzle? Or are you Aaron Rodgers, and teams figure you out once every 6 weeks, and 17 years later, you're still winning MVPs and 13 games in the playoffs? I know that's an NFL analogy, but like that's what it's going to take. So to answer your question, I would not bet against Tommy Mellott because he's gonna outwork everybody. Period. But he's also going to have to overcome so many obstacles internally and externally before they get to that point.
I've been having similar thoughts. I haven't wanted to voice them, number one, to jinx anything. Number two, I don't want to get roasted by Bobcat fans. Like, I'm not so sure Tommy's Malot's quarterback next year, but we'll get into that later on in a postseason podcast over here. But my last question for you, though.
Well, if he wins on Saturday, he's the quarterback next year.
Yeah, how do you possibly bench a national championship winning quarterback, period? I don't know how that happens, but
well, Nick Saban did, though, once upon a time.
Yeah, that's a whole different beast.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about, though. Nick Saban benched Jalen Hurts once upon a time. Who just made the playoffs in the NFL several years later? Jalen Hurts. It's all about, as a quarterback, when do you hit that speed bump, and then how do you overcome it? It's going to happen to every single dude ever. How do you overcome it? That's the key. And Tommy can. And again, how can you possibly bet against this kid? If he can, he will.
You mentioned that there's no game plan for him yet. My last question, I guess, probably the first of many last questions as they keep popping into my head, is that Montana State's biggest strength right now is still kind of the element of surprise with Tommy Malott?
It's so interesting. I think that so much of it, though, there's an element of surprise for sure, but I really think it does come back to the thing I touched on earlier, is that the offense that Butte High ran, like, seriously, in Tommy Malott's arsenal, the second best weapon besides his running ability is the fact that he can throw the back shoulder fade at an elite level. Like, it's not just like a coincidence. Like, he throws dimes on the back shoulder fade. Like, that touchdown to Willie Patterson.
Yeah.
Well, it's like,
best throw I've seen a Bobcat quarterback make in years.
Are you kidding me? Like, I don't even think Darius McGee can make that throw. Like, that was a dime. So, that's the biggest thing he's got. Like, here's the deal. NDSU doesn't run anything on defense. Nothing. There's no scheme. I still say, I mean, that's being dismissive and also cliche. But NDSU runs less stuff, defensively, than almost anybody in the country. Why? Because they have a system, they have discipline, they have consistency, and they have talent that's superior to everybody else. But, like, if you compare and contrast, like, the Grizz literally blitz 60% of the plays, and NDSU blitzes like 6% of the plays. Like, the Cats run like every coverage you could possibly run. NDSU runs the same shit every single down because they know that it's all about execution. Like, how many NDSU guys have won the Buck Buchanan Award during this run? None, because I guess Kyle Emanuel won it one year. But, like, statistical superiority is not a part of the game plan. It's not a part of the goals of the program for individuals to win those things for exposure and recruiting, because they already got it all down. They got the formula fully down. We go to the national championship every year. You're going to come to Fargo, North Dakota, and you're never going to have to go outside. You're going to play 12 home games a year because we never have to leave Fargo for the playoffs. And we're going to churn. And it doesn't matter if you don't even win the Buck Buchanan Award or get any individual accolades, you're still getting drafted. So they have the ultimate formula. And so that's the whole thing, is like, they don't have to run anything to win. So because of that, though, it makes it very simple in terms of what's going to happen on Saturday. They will have somebody for Tommy Malott in the plus one run game. They will have somebody for Isaiah Fonse. Those guys are not going to get loose, period. It ain't happening. So it's going to come down to two factors. One, can Tommy Malott make back shoulder throws like he has all playoffs long? Because that's the one deficiency of North Dakota State's defense. How did Brady Gustafson's Montana team beat North Dakota State? Straight up back shoulder fades to Ellis Anderson and Jamal Jones. That's it. That's all. Beat the cover two over the top. That's the number one factor for the Cats. But number two is, do they have an ace up their sleeve? What's the secret weapon offensively? I'm not trying to speculate anything. I'm purely speaking from my heart right now. I will be incredibly disappointed if Brent Vigen and Taylor Housewright and Troy Anderson doesn't touch the ball offensively on Saturday. Ooh. And I think that's what it comes down to. Do you have a back shoulder? Do you have back shoulder throws in your arsenal, or can you figure out 6 to 8 touches for the best offensive player you have, who happens to be the defensive player of the year in the league?
Gosh, man. See, I was thinking
there's a debate going.
The tight ends, like Trayton Pickerings or Davis would be the secret sauce, but you went full Troy Anderson on us. God darn.
I mean, I'm going to be so sad if Troy Anderson plays his last year of college football without getting an offensive touch. How's that going to happen? They have to give him something.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even argue with that. That would be I'd be okay with it as long as it's not in a desperation mode, kind of like it was in Cat Grizz. I was kind of disappointed to see it roll out like that. I got
a stat for you. I believe this is true. You might want to stat check me, but I'm pretty sure this is true.
We have no researchers. You're fine.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure over the last. Well, first of all, I know over the last during this NDSU run, since their first national championship in 2011, when Brent Vigen was the offensive coordinator there, they've won 8 out of 9 national championships. They're 8-0 in Frisco. Mm-hmm. They've only lost 12 games since 2011. That's it. 12 games total. 5 of those games have been to South Dakota State, who Montana State, oh, by the way, just beat. Right? But I'm pretty sure that there's only been 3 guys to rush for more than 100 yards against North Dakota State in that span. I'm pretty sure it's Zach Zenner from South Dakota State, who went on to play for the Detroit Lions. James Robinson from Illinois State, who is currently the starting running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Troy Anderson, when he was a sophomore quarterback in 2018, in a game that Montana State lost 52-10. But in that game,
Pierre Strong.
Maybe Pierre Strong
had 100. Yeah, he had 156 yards.
This last year.
He had a lot of that on one run from like the second or third play of the game.
That's a great part of the sample size too, because that dude's getting drafted in the top 3 rounds too. I mean, he declared for the draft early, and he's going to get picked for sure. So, but anyways, I mean, the point is, like, Chris Kleiman still talks about Troy Anderson. Like, Matt Entz talked about him too, and they talk about him through the lens of a quarterback or a runner. You know, like that game when they lost 52-10 in 2018, Troy Anderson still had 130 yards in that game. He had one of his 50-yard touchdowns in that game. So I don't know, man. I just think it's from a selfish point of view, from a spectacle and spectator point of view, I want to see Troy Anderson get that ball one more time.
Well, it's definitively his last game, so we're going to go the old water boy Dan Fouts. Can't hold anything back on this game here. So, yeah, I can't argue with that. Like, I would be a little disappointed if we didn't see it. I don't know. What do you think, Foley? Would you like to see Troy Anderson get a carry or a touch?
Yeah, like you said, if it's not out of desperation, if it's part of the game plan, I mean, obviously when Troy Anderson's coming in, everybody's going to be like, that's Troy Anderson back there. Like, he's getting the ball. So I don't know how you disguise it, or does he play in lieu of a quarterback? Does he?
You play him at quarterback the very first snap of the game.
There you go.
Ooh.
I hope that initial script, I like that. I hope Matt Entz doesn't listen to this shit.
Yeah. He might not, but he graduate assistant might. He's got some sort of analyst down there listening to this.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much does it for this show here. Why don't you, everyone has to know by here, but why don't you go ahead and tell everyone where they can listen to you and find your content?
Yeah. This was, first of all, this was awesome, guys. I appreciate you having me, and I loved doing it with you, and little R&R and Big Sky Breakdown is something that has to happen in the future as well. I got lots of things to run by you guys during the off season.
We're always game.
Absolutely. In the meantime, though, you can always listen to Nuanez now, my daily radio show, live from 4 to 6 Montana time. You can stream it if you're in Western Montana. It's 102.9 FM, ESPN radio. And if you're out of the Western Montana area, you can always stream it. I think that's like the main way. It's crazy. Like, everybody listens to all this stuff digitally now, which is awesome.
That's what I do.
That's right. So 1029ESPN.com. You can always stream it. or you can always find the Nuanez Now podcast, all your podcast hosting platforms, NUANEZ. Or if you want to see me on the YouTube or the TV, if you're in Montana, you can watch me on SWX Montana TV live from 4 to 6 every Monday through Friday, or on YouTube. This Nuanez Now, same thing. So there's all sorts of ways to consume it, but also SkylineSportsMT.com. We have a lot of cross promotion with our ESPN radio deal there, and also the Big Sky Breakdown exclusively. Recording the Big Sky Breakdown this week with both Ty Gregorak, former Montana State defensive coordinator, as well as Mike Kramer, former Montana State head coach. So that'll be fun. Sam Herder's also going to jump on from Hero Sports, so that'll be fun. So SkylineSportsMT.com. You can always find all the multimedia stuff, and then we also have a bunch of cool features. Andrew Houghton, one of our writers at Skyline Sports, is working on a feature about the arc of the last 2 years, from the moment Montana State lost 49-14 to Fargo, North Dakota, back in December of 2019 till now, and everything that happened in between, from that loss to COVID to Jeff Choate leaving to Troy Anderson's injury saga, and Daniel Hardy's position switch, and everything in between. Wow. That's going to be Andrew's feature for the week. And I got a good feature up there right now from Tom Stuber about Brent Vegan and his connections to North Dakota State. Tom also has a feature coming up about the sort of dichotomy between the advantages and disadvantages of the bye. On one hand, MSU could get Afonso and Chase Benson and Kyle Cotta back, but on the other hand, can Tommy Malott stay hot? So Tom's got a story on that. And then I got my story about just the legacy of Butte, Montana, and the mining city, and then how it's influenced the Bobcats and the Tommy Malott and his moment in time at this exact moment as well. And then also have a little quick hitter as well as sort of a bonus story about Lance McCutcheon and just where this single season ranks in Montana State history. So you can find all that stuff as well, SkylineSportsMT.com. So you guys are doing great work, man, and I appreciate you guys having me. And it's awesome to talk to all your listeners and be a part of this thing.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. And it was a really good collaboration. I'm glad we reached out. I'm glad you agreed to come on. And, if you're listening to our podcast, if you're a listener of our podcast and somehow you haven't listened to Colter or read any of Colter's content, please go do that. But as for us, you can always find us on Twitter, RRCatcast. That's our Twitter handle. You can always find us on the web, rrcatcast.com. We have an email, rrcatcast@gmail.com. You can always email us there, but I think Twitter's probably the best bet to reach out to us. But, fully, let's get out here with the Go Cats. I don't know if Colter will do that, but we'll do our typical ending of Go Cats here.
Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Hey, man, like I said on my my show before I went into the holiday break and coming out of it for the new year, I think that the world we live in and everything we've gone through the last couple of years, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of loopholes, and it's divided us a lot. There's been a lot of negativity. And so I would just encourage anybody and everybody. I think that every person that could possibly listen to this podcast has some sort of connection to the state of Montana. And I think that anybody that follows my stuff definitely has a connection to the state of Montana. And so there's an element of nuance that can exist here. And it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, or what, if you're a Bobcat or Grizz or whatever, man. Like, what is playing out is a spectacular story that is absolutely going to resonate throughout the history of sports in Montana forever. People will never forget this moment in time and the characters that existed within this story. And so I would just encourage everybody to enjoy it. I don't care if you're a Bobcat fan or a Grizz fan, the Cats win or lose on Saturday, all that stuff. Like, this is one of the great sports stories that has played out in the state of Montana. And so I hope that everybody can at least see the positive in that, or at least enjoy that element of it right now. Because it still is the holiday season. So I hope everybody can find some sort of positivity and enjoyment and fulfillment in what's happened over these last couple of months and what might happen on Saturday.
Absolutely. Those are wise words. Soak it up. Enjoy the ride. And, thanks again, Colter, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.